Hey there, it's Melissa again at Safe Haven, and today we're going to talk about you're tougher than you think you are. And I just heard somebody say, sister, you don't know me because I'm not that tough. Yes, you are. In Romans 8:35 to 37, it says, who shall separate us from the love of Christ? Shall tribulation or distress or persecution or famine or nakedness or peril or sword? Or COVID-19, I could throw that in there. Yet in all these things, we are more than conquerors through him who loved us. When life gets tough, Paul's talking about some of the things that might seem to separate us from the love of God. You see, we need to know this because we need to know that God is for us and not against us. And in that verse, it ends up by saying, we are more than conquerors when we walk in God's love. That means that when things don't go our way, it doesn't mean God's angry with us. It doesn't mean he's punishing us or he wants to hurt us. That's not what it means. No matter what, we can depend on the love of God. I don't know how many of you have ever heard of a monk named Brother Lawrence. Well, Brother Lawrence was pretty amazing. He was a monk that lived years ago, and there's a book written about him called Practicing the Presence. This man loved Jesus so much that he was with him all day long, and he was in a constant communication with him. And he had two jobs in the monkery, whatever they call that place. And so what he did was he washed the pots and pans. Now you may be thinking that's no big deal. Well, if you think that, you've never washed a whole bunch of pots and pans after a Thanksgiving dinner. He did it every day. And the other thing he did was he fixed the sandals of the other monks. The good news is that he learned how to stay in God's presence 24/7. He said, I know that God's with me and I have the joy of the Lord no matter what I'm doing and no matter what's going on around me. Can you say that today? You know, life is all about perspective. Let me give you an example. If you were an ordinary swimmer and you're standing by the side of the ocean and you see these waves come rolling in, it can really unnerve you and think, okay, I better back away today. But if you're a surfer and you've been out on the water and you see those waves picking up, there's an excitement and a joy that picks up inside of you because you know that when you jump on that wave, you're going to ride the top of that thing. How do you know that? Because you've done it before. Now listen to me on this. You've done it before. You see, the good news is what you did back then, you need to remember that because God can do it then. He'll do it today. He'll do it tomorrow. God never changes. We do, but he doesn't. You know, maybe you feel like right now you're riding the wave and it's going to overwhelm you. The enemy would love to destroy you and make you miserable. But God, you know those are my favorite words, but God knew this storm was coming before it ever hit. Whatever storm you're in, he knew it was coming. And he made a way, designed a path for you to walk through it, over it, under it, but he's going to get you to where he wants you to be. God's never caught off guard, and he's always working on our behalf. I wish I'd gotten a handle on this thought years and years ago because it sure would have made my life a whole lot easier. When I didn't understand God, I was scared and I walked in fear and I walked in doubt and I walked in worry. We don't want to do that. You know, planet Earth is like this giant waiting room, a giant waiting room. Have you ever been stuck in a doctor's office in the waiting room? Let me tell you, that's no picnic. If you're in the outer area, it's not bad because they got magazines. At least you can read while you're out there. But then they take you back to this waiting room in the back, and it's way colder than you want it to be and dead quiet. And you sit there. And you sit there. Your only job is to wait. And I got to tell you, that's a tough assignment while you're sitting there. But after a while, now I may know this from experience, but after a while, I tell you, sometimes I think I've been deserted and they've gone to lunch. So you know what I did? Well, I just went to the door and hollered. I don't know how loud I hollered. I don't think it was real loud, but I got to tell you, 3 doors opened up and I got their attention and I said, hey, is anybody in here? I thought you'd gone to lunch. They thought it was funny, but I'm still waiting. Sometimes I felt like that with God. God, where are you? I know the promises you gave. I know what I've asked for, and yet I'm just not seeing the ending. When we're waiting, it's like time stands still. You know what I mean? We live in a generation that tries to stuff so much in one day. There's no way on God's green earth we could do it all. Waiting is not one of our strong suits. Think about on planet Earth, God's big waiting room. The couple that's waited for years to have a baby, and now they're waiting to get test results or waiting for the adoption agency. Or the man who's worked for years for a company and knew that he'd retire there, and now he's waiting in the unemployment line, waiting to find out if there's a job for him someday. The tests are in, possible cancer, job loss, divorce, you're having a fever, and you've got a cough, and all of those people are waiting for results, waiting to see what's going to happen, waiting on God to open that door so we can cry out to him and say, God, rescue me, help me, get me out of this mess. We're just stuck sometimes. Why do some people ride the wave with joy and others are falling apart? Because they know that God is on their side. You remember the story of Joseph? Well, we all really remember the story of Joseph. God loved him. He was betrayed by his brothers, sold into slavery, thrown into prison. It went from bad to bad to bad to worse. But Joseph held on to his faith, and he was about 17 years old when he was put in the prison. And when he came out, he was in his 30s. Think about that. But he didn't come out bitter. He didn't come out angry. I'm wondering how we would have come out. In Genesis 41:15, there's a verse that says, Pharaoh says to Joseph, I've had a dream. I need to know if you can interpret that dream for me. And Joseph answers him and says, not I, but God. But God can do it. And listen to this. God will set Pharaoh's heart and mind at ease. Do you want God to set your mind at ease? Then you've got to know who he is. You've got to know that he's never left you, and he's right there working on your behalf. Joseph comes out of prison bragging on God, for Pete's sakes. Jail didn't devastate his faith. It didn't tear him down. You may be in a prison right now, but it's not a prison with steel bars. Maybe you're in a prison of worry and doubt and fear. Maybe you're in depression. Maybe you're in a prison of a bad relationship or a prison of poor health. Whatever it is, these prisons are as real as steel bars. Maybe you're stuck right now. But just because you're not working and you're waiting and waiting, that doesn't mean that God's waiting. God works always behind the scene. John 5:17 says, my Father is always at work. I like that one. Just because you aren't doing anything, don't assume that God's not. I've always been amazed at the story of the Red Sea. Maybe because I know me, and I know that I probably would not have been one of the great leaders then. The Red Sea, Moses sees the people, the water's in front of them. The army of the Egyptians is coming up fast behind them. And I got to tell you, I might have unraveled at that time as I'm watching everything happen, because when you got your back to the wall and there's no way out, listen, life can get pretty scary. Well, the good news is God says to Moses, let me give you the words to tell the people. And this is what he said. And this is in Exodus 13:14. And Moses said to the people, do not be afraid. Stand still and see the salvation of the Lord, which he will accomplish for you today. For the Egyptians whom you see today, you shall see no more again forever. The Lord will fight for you, and you shall hold your peace. You know what my thought would have been? Stand still. That's the best you can offer. Stand still. I got to tell you, I wouldn't have done too good work. I just don't think I would have done good. But you see, the God of all the ages was taking care of them already. He'd already planned a path for them through the bottom of the water. And he knew that when his breath came out, that water was going to part, that ground was going to dry, and 1,000,000 people were going to walk across that pathway. How do you know that? Because God had a plan. In Romans 8:28, in the CEV Bible, it said, God is always at work for the good of everyone who loves him. We know that verse in the King James, and it says, and we know that all things work together. How many things? All things work together for good to those that love God and are the called according to his purpose. If I was sitting with you right now, I would say, hang in there. Hang in there. And I'd also say, believe that the love of God has got you covered. And know that you're tougher than you think you are. Because God is surrounding you like a shield. I want to end with a quick prayer today. Father, thank you so much for this day. I pray for every person under the sound of my voice that you will make yourself known to them and they will see you in a way they never have before. In Jesus' name, amen. God bless.